When you look through the various religion books of other settings, do you ever stop and think that maybe 3 paragraphs aren't enough to explain what's going on here? They talk mainly about the god being worshipped, but skimp on how it's done. Well, that doesn't happen in Religions of Mystara, the sister book to the legendary Codex Immortalis by Marco del Monte. To showcase precisely the amount of detail you get with this official piece of fanon, today we're looking at the Church of Thyatis. A state-sponsored pantheon was there to put everybody in their place, as long as that place was totally obedient to the empire. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's Spectacles, Testicles, Wallet, and Watch time. All of the information in this video primarily comes from Religions of Mystara over at the Vaults of Pandius, which makes it fanon. And it's held in such high regard it's considered official fanon. The Immortals are detailed in Wrath of the Immortals and expanded upon in the Codex Immortalis. I will be talking in detail about the Immortals I've never covered before, but glossing over the more common ones that have appeared repeatedly, like Ixion, Vanya, and Odin. But how many people have talked about Idriote, Carnelian, or Petura? The Church of Thyatis was established in the 2nd century AC by Empress Valentia to provide the empire with a unifying message that your duty is to Thyatis, and those who rule it in whatever capacity know what's best for you. This isn't just those currently ruling over you, but those who have ruled over the nation beforehand. People are to be loyal, trusting, willing, and respectful. This attitude preserves Thyatis, and by those means makes everybody's life better. The government responds to the trust given to it by the lay people by doing what is best in their interest. It sounds a bit draconian and self-serving on paper, but for the status-minded Thyatians, it perfectly encapsulates their philosophy. Sometimes you have to give a little to get a little. The church is highly structured, because it's Thyatian. All of the laws, tenets, and beliefs are written down and made available to every temple. They have a set procedure for every ritual, provide prayer books with approved and suggested hymns, and every part of the religion has been decided on by the Assembly of Elders and the Pontifex Maximus, or the Pontifex Magnus. He switches between those titles, which are the church leaders. Despite its rigid set of laws, it's not an oppressive religion. The tenets tell the faithful who to listen to when they have questions, but they don't lord over people and prefer simple guidance. It's a core belief that the meaning of life is sacrifice, and sacrifice is only worthy if it's done with free will. The church doesn't want brainwashed fanatics. It wants people who study the teachings and use them to get ahead in life under their merit. You are welcome to raise your family and live your life the way you want, just as long as it falls under Thyatian customs. 16 immortals form the pantheon of the church. They are Vanya, Terastia, Asterius, Valerius, Coronis, Tyserius, Wayland, under the guise of Vulcan, Odin, Thor, Ixion, under the guise of Celerius, Isildur, Cagiar, Corius, Idriote, Carnelian, and Petura. These are not the founding members of the pantheon. Instead, these are the immortals that the church has decided to add to their worship. Each one has helped Thyatis significantly in the past and has a sizable following in the empire. New immortals can be added through the ritual of evocatio, but this is difficult to do and requires a mortal sponsor to convince the pontifex and a council of sages. If successful, a ritual is held in the great cathedral of Thyatis, where the pontifex welcomes the new patriarch of the church, and the immortals' places of worship are formally absorbed into the Church of Thyatis. There are 5 steps necessary to petition the church for the ritual of evocatio successfully, and the petitioners have to succeed at all of them to the satisfaction of the pontifex. The church will hold tests for all these conditions, usually in a ceremony at one of the larger churches. The representative of the immortal in question will answer the questions, perform the tasks, or anything else that is required, and everything is considered. It doesn't have to be the same person for each test. It makes for a stronger case if multiple people are pushing for the immortal's inclusion. The first is the test of beliefs. The cult must obtain permission to build a temple to their immortal in the empire's borders. They have 1 month to make the structure, which doesn't need to be a large one, just big enough to hold services in. The church proper will supervise the construction and, throughout the process, test the people involved on their beliefs, their immortal, and how they fit in with Thyatian culture. If the observers are satisfied, the church will be allowed to open. The second is the test of magic. This requires someone who is a cleric of the specific immortal to show that they can cast clerical magic on command. This can be proven with abilities provided to clerics of a supernatural origin, like turning undead or manifesting a cleric ability specific to the followers of the immortal, such as Ka's gift of infravision to his followers. This is an easy test to pass, which is why it's early on the list. It's easy to spot a charlatan who can't even produce a spell. The third test is the test of deeds. The cult wishing to join has to perform a task that benefits the whole of Thyatis. This should coincide with the philosophy of the immortal, demonstrating that the cult benefits society as a whole. Petura, patron of motherhood, has numerous hospitals built by her cult devoted to childbirth and children. In contrast, Carnelian, patron of machitos and tradition, had her cult help rebuild the duchy after it was stripped of resources with the departure of Stephen Karamikos. The cult will have to convince the council that their deeds are worthy, and only then will they be allowed to proceed to the next phase. The test of numbers is easy to pass, but it might require some time to accomplish, so it's one of the last trials needed. Simply enough, the cult must have 100 members to qualify for the ritual. The required number of members has to be inside the borders of Thyatis, but not all of them need to live there. When the church has enough followers, they hold a service where the required number is present, and the council will do a head count and ask random questions to followers to ensure they are true believers. The last test is the test of leadership, and this is where the politicking starts. The cult has to select a leader and present him or her to the pontifex. The leader has to impress the pontifex with their devotion and their capability. Bootlicking isn't required, but it is highly appreciated. If the pontifex rejects the leader, the process starts all over. However, if the pontifex approves, the cult leader is named the new elder, and the cult is officially absorbed into the Church of Thyatis to much fanfare. This is a rare event, happening maybe a dozen times in 8 centuries. So now that we know how an immortal cult joins the Church of Thyatis, what are the primary beliefs? Like the 5 steps for joining, there are 5 primary beliefs that the devout are expected to follow. Thyatians take breaking these rules very seriously. In extreme cases, not only are you stripped of any rank in the church, excommunicated and shunned, but the church can have your very citizenship taken away. As the church is part of the Thyatian government, the power is immense. Don't go around paying lip service to your beliefs. That will end badly. The first belief is loyalty to the state. This is the most essential part of the church, and the most cardinal sin you can commit is to betray or lie to a high-ranking member of the church or government. Likewise, the highest honor you can receive is martyrdom to Thyatis. To the church, the words of the emperor and the Pontifex Maximus are held in equal measure. This section of the church's teaching instructs the followers to obey the laws, not to question their superiors, and to further the goals of Thyatis as set by the leaders of the empire. It relies heavily on the divine right of kings, and the immortals place the appropriate leaders to rule because they're the best choice. The second rule is the respect of tradition. This is compiled in the Liber Valentianus, the book of faith penned by the Empress Valencia at the start of the church. This comprises every tradition the church values, as voted upon by a group known as the Keepers of Tradition. They update the book based on the decisions of the Assembly of Elders and the Pontifex, adding new traditions and striking outdated ones. They are also in charge of mass-producing the book for the faithful. The most important traditions are acting fairly with their fellow Thyatians, making the world better, or at least more like Thyatis, keeping to the feast days, and listening to the seers known as the haruspices. Respect the immortals is the third rule, which involves following the mandates set down by the members of the Pantheon. In case of mixed signals, follow the teachings that best improve Thyatis. This rule also lists immortals to oppose, comprising certain entropic immortals like Thanatos, Orcus, and Alphax, plus the entire Alphatian Pantheon. Other cults, especially chaotic but well-meaning faiths like Tyche or Koratuku, are tolerated. The fourth rule is to respect the ancestors, commonly seen as mortals of outstanding achievements who didn't quite obtain immortality but have been canonized by the faith. Most families have at least one ancestor who accomplished a historic feat that they idolize as part of this teaching, even if history might have glossed over the actual events. These ancestors might not rise to the position of saint, but the main difference being that praying to a saint can sometimes lead to the gifting of spells. Many cults will argue that a revered saint is in secret an immortal, which causes all manners of theological arguments, like the one currently happening over Saint Lyanna, Emperor Thinkal's mother. The last rule is respect of neighbors. Thyatians are expected to be a unified people, and internal bickering does nothing to further their greatness. The church strongly encourages its followers to avoid conflicts with fellow Thyatians and to settle arguments using church mediators. Please note that this rule only applies to Thyatians. The follower is not obligated to play fair in any way if there is a dispute between outsiders, something the church encourages. And you wonder why they have a reputation for treachery. The various ranks of clergy have their own vestments, denoting their position, rank, and duty. The only thing that all the garments share is the holy symbol displayed somewhere on them, usually their chest. The symbol for the Church of Thyatis is a crown encircling the blue imperial eagle, which is holding 2 lightning bolts, signifying the power of the Pontifex, the Emperor, and Thyatis' absolute dominance in 1980s van art competitions. The beginning rank is that of acolyte, which is every first-level cleric or layperson aspiring to join the faith. They have no spells, and they wear a brown, long-sleeved robe down to their ankles. They are considered to be in training, so they rarely have weapons or armor unless approved by a higher-ranking cleric in order to start their adventuring career. Most people never meet acolytes because they're in studies. While the faithful can be of either sex without penalty, during their time as acolytes, men and women are kept separate to keep their minds on their studies. Actual clerics are at least second level and full church members. Their white robes will have a brown sash around the waist as a belt. They can openly carry weapons and armor if they are of an adventuring profession, but most spend their times in temples with little need to protect themselves. Most clerics, a full 80%, are considered philosophers who represent the teachings of the church as a whole. 18% are polytheistic clerics who teach the combined lessons of all the Pantheon's immortals. Lastly, 2% are specialists who teach the lessons just from a single specific immortal. The philosopher clerics look down on these guys, and as such, they have little power inside the church. There are numerous holy orders in the Church of Thyatis, which clerics can join if invited. It's not mandatory to join an order, and most clerics don't. The haruspices are diviners tasked once a month to evaluate the predictions of oracles and translate any omens, dreams, or visions. Hospitaliers run various houses of healing across the empire. Guardians are tasked with protecting holy sites and high-ranking church officials. Itinerants have no set home and travel to where the immortals send them. They make up a large number of adventuring clerics. Militants are the armed branch of the church and hunt down heretics and assist in army operations. Missionaries are only found outside the empire, protecting its interests. Thanatologists are tasked with hunting undead and performing funerary rites on the dead. Lastly, the theologians study the teachings of the church and serve as advisors to high-ranking members of the Thyatian government. Next in rank are the curates, who must be of at least 5th level. These are administrators of the church and administer a curia, a church district around 1,000 followers in each of them. They wear white robes with gilded sleeves, a purple sash as a belt, and a silver ring with the holy symbol. Many of the orders looking into seeing if an immortal is worthy of joining the church or someone is deserving of sainthood are comprised entirely of curates. The prophets are at least 7th level and rule over all the curias in a given province. They wear black tunics with gold embroidery with a white sash. They carry a silver scepter, a gold medallion, and a monogrammed ring. They determine the course of action for the church in their chosen territory and rule over the curates, ensuring that they don't deviate too far from the teachings. Every curate in a region answers to the same prophet. The elder patriarchs are part of the assembly of the elders. They dress in long red silk robes with a white sash, a gold medallion, monogrammed ring, and carry a golden scepter. They appoint the prophets and determine what's appropriate for the faith's followers, making many of the most difficult decisions. There is exactly one elder for every immortal in the pantheon, but elders don't have to represent a specific immortal. The Pontifex Magnus is the ruler of the church and second only to the emperor in terms of political power. In theory, if a pontifex were to act against then called actively, the church would soon need to promote another pontifex, preferably one that doesn't lose his head. The pontifex wears a simple white robe with a jeweled staff and the pontiff's ring on his finger, an ancient artifact from the time of Empress Valencia. He answers only to the emperor, but the lower councils can remove him if necessary. This has happened maybe twice since the founding of the church. Despite their massive amount of rules and power, the church is limited in civil ceremonies, leaving marriages up to the state laws. A couple can be married by a priest, but it isn't a requirement of the faith. They can just as easily be married by a civil servant or even a high-ranking family member in the government. The exceptions to this peculiar hands-off approach are funerals and coronations. The emperor cannot take the throne without the blessing of the pontifex, keeping the power concentrated at the top. When a Thyatian dies, they have to undergo many ceremonies to prepare them for the afterlife and their journey back to the land of the living. This ceremony is not optional and is one of the oldest laws in the Liber Valentianus. Ignoring this ceremony is an excellent way to get excommunicated. Of the immortals worshipped in the pantheon, not all of them are worshipped as equals. The longer an immortal has been part of the pantheon, the more power their particular clerics hold. There is a pecking order among the elders, with the followers of Vanya holding the most respect. Of note is Ixion, who fell from favor in the church after the Ispin affair, where his teachings ran counter to the others in handling the removal of the Ispin people to the Red Coast. His clerics have lost much influence, but not enough to get them expelled from the pantheon. This is an unusual position for the clerics of Ixion, who are quite used to their elevated status. Of the immortals, I've covered most of them in videos I did on the spheres of power, as they represent some of the most famous and influential. All temples will have them represented in a fresco or as an icon. Many have a small shrine devoted to them individually. A few places of worship focus on just one immortal. The most famous is the original church, erected as part of the ritual evocatio. Followers of those particular immortals will often perform a pilgrimage to that building, coming from other nations as part of their faith. There are 4 immortals that I've never covered before, being lesser known, though not necessarily weaker. They just have smaller domains than, say, sun or war. Tiresias is the patron of dreams, prophecy, poetry, music, and bards. He predates the rise of the Millennian Empire, being born during the time of the ancient Traldar. He was famous for his accurate predictions and wise counsel, but was betrayed by a jealous queen and blinded and exiled for his troubles. He saw the coming of the Beastmen and pleaded with the Hutakans to aid the humans in the upcoming war, but they locked themselves away and banished him once again. The bard traveled with the future founder of the Millennian Empire, and that's where he ascended to immortality. He is a friendly immortal with numerous allies. He's also famous for always answering in a riddle, song, or poem. He attracts followers of all persuasions, even ones that have little in common with each other. Idriote is the patron of Thyatian magic and wizards. He is of Arabic descent, not Yalari. He comes from the same world as the D'Ambervilles and the McGregors, only by a different means. He was trying to summon one little major demon, and instead found himself gated to Mystara, right before the Thyatian rebellion. Thankfully, he ended up in Tel Akbir, so he could pass himself as one of the natives there. He allied with General Licinius, who promised Idriote his own magic school if he would help with one little assassination and kill all the other allied kings in order for Licinius to secure the imperial throne for himself. The wizard agreed, fully aware that Licinius might turn on him as well, but he thought there was a chance that he could convince the general to keep his word. However, he was later approached by Licinius' right-hand man, Zendrolian, who offered Idriote the same deal, in exchange for one little massive betrayal in killing Licinius. Zendrolian kept his word, needing a powerful wizard and having killed the previous most powerful wizard, being Licinius. Idriote later ascended and spent his immortality researching new forms of magic and new types of science. Carnelian is the patron of tradition, nobility, and the Duchy of Machatos. She proves that anyone can become immortal through their efforts and talents. In her case, her talents were bureaucratic skills beyond that of mere mortals. She was born into nobility, and her father ruled over what would become the Duchy of Machatos. Here we've got our first continuity snarl, because it says her mother was an elf and her father was human, which means she should have been an elf. So cheat and say her mother was a human born of elves. She becomes the ruler of the Dimrock Forest after the death of her parents, and she realizes it was doomed unless she could bring civilization to the area. So she marries Senator Alexandros Keramikos and uses her training, natural intelligence, and wealth to turn a backwater settlement into a full-blown duchy. When her son was grown, her husband passed away, so she gave her title to her heir and joined the clergy to serve Thyatis further. There she reached the rank of Pontifex Maximus and was allowed to ascend to immortality. She is naturally the most popular immortal in her former domain, but she feels betrayed by her ancestor Stephen Keramikos and has nothing to do with his new nation. Secretly, she's torn, as she feels that society dictated her life and she missed out on many of its joys. She's contemplating indulging in all the passions she ignored in her life and abandoning her duties, at least for a while. Patura is the patron of Thyatian women and motherhood and the former empress of Thyatis. In her mortal life, she was Pausania Monomachus, daughter of Valeria II. She took the throne in 643 AC when her brother Adrian and her family were lost at sea. She became the empress at age 20 and was seen as a puppet by various senators and generals looking to make her their wife. This made Pausania distrustful of men and earned her the moniker of the Virgin Empress. She significantly improved the lot of Thyacian women by placing them in positions of power, but this caused the men that they replaced to plot against her. When she discovered the plot, she executed the traitors on the advice of her spiritual advisor, a woman named Daphne. But then the priestess encouraged the empress not to stop there, and soon she targeted anyone who had spoken ill of her. The Senate deposed her for exceeding her power, and even the immortal Ixion turned his back on her. She spent some time on a rampage of revenge until the priestess Daphne ordered her to kill the children of the patriarch of Ixion. Then she realized how far she had fallen and turned on her advisor, who turned out to be a demonic creature sent to corrupt the empress. So, good job, Daphne. After years of penance, she was finally forgiven by Ixion and later ascended to immortality. Now she still deals with the guilt of all the murders she committed, but she is also fiercely devoted to mothers and, more importantly, children. That's the Church of Thyatis. It turned out to be a rather large topic compared to the other religions because Thyatians love their rules, and Italians love to write about epic stuff. Now you have a lot of background information to use if your adventurers ever find themselves in the Empire. Maybe they even meet the Pontifex. But it's up to you to name them because Marco left that part off. Next week we are doing a monster video with the birds of Mystara, and there's a fair bit of our flappy friends. And only a few of them will kill you. Okay, more than just a few. Okay, if it's got feathers, get ready to run. Until then, sic gorgiamus a los subjectos nunc.